Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today in this session, which is part of our Reconnect program. We are really delighted to be back and resume our sessions and have you with us. So I'm really pleased today to introduce Mark Eggins. Mark is an academic skills advisor, and he joins us all the way through from Australia. It's almost early evening now in Australia, and
Yes.
we really appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much for your time and willingness to support our students in really this challenging time and circumstances. So, Mark, today we'll be talking about some key principles of academic writing, something really important for our students and academic community in Gaza. These are important issues that most of our students really struggle with and need to understand. So this is a timely and important topic, and we're looking forward to hearing and learning from you, Mark. So over to you, Mark.
Okay. Thank you, Ahmed, and welcome everybody. So, as you can see, the title is Some Key Principles of Academic Writing. So they're not rules, they're just ideas that I think you can generally follow, but sometimes you can break, if you have a good reason to do that. Just a bit more about myself. I'm with Australian Catholic University, been here over 10 years, and before that I was at University Melbourne doing a similar thing. But I've never done a session exactly like this. So I developed this uniquely just for this group. So hopefully, you'll get something out of it. And it's not meant to be too academic. It's meant to be relatively informal and interactive. So I might ask you a few questions as we go along. So basically, I think one of the first key principles is do not see yourself as just a student, who wants to pass or whatever and get a piece of paper. It's more that you're an apprentice in whatever discipline you are in. So because of that, you need to communicate your understanding. That's really what all your assessments are about. Of course, you want to pass and everything, but
David,
you
David,
have to show
that's why.
that you understand. You are demonstrating your understanding. And so you do that in a formal way and with the language of your discipline. And your writing needs to flow, but it also needs to make sense. So you need the cohesion and the coherence. You need to convey the complexity and nuance of whatever area you're in, because everything is complicated. But having said that, you still need to be kind of relatively logical, relevant, and consistent, so it's easy to understand. And with all that, you also need to develop your own, what they call academic voice. And there are a few ways of doing that, but it sounds like with the journal and the storytelling, that's other ways you can do that as well. But I'm going to just focus more on the academic side of that. So one way I think to remember things is just with numbers. So what I've got here is a few key principles considering numbers. So starting with 0, generally no references in your conclusion because there shouldn't be any new information. One key idea per paragraph, particularly body paragraph, I mean there. Keep your topic sentences around 2 lines long. Because if they are too long, it might seem like there's more than one idea there. And most assessments are structured in 3 parts, introduction, body, conclusion. And every page of your text have around 3 paragraphs, and making sure each paragraph has at least 3 sentences. Because if you've only got a topic sentence and one supporting sentence, it's really not quite enough to, really support your point. And that's very important in academic work because you are building on the ideas of experts. Just to give you an anecdote, sometimes students won't write much and there'll be no reference, and you know, and they'll say, yeah, but I know all that, you know, it's all up here. I know it all. And sometimes as a joke, I say, well, perhaps you better leave university. You don't need anything. So, but the point really is, though, that even if you do know some material the same as experts, you need to give your ideas credibility by using references from those expert sources. That's very important in terms of that academic voice and building in that apprentice way. Okay. What if you have more than one idea in your body paragraph? Now, I've said there are three main options, but before I reveal those, would anyone like to put in the chat something you could do to change your body paragraph if you thought there was more than one idea? Anyone have any ideas about that?
في ثقافة الاطلاع
And by the way, you can just say you don't have to put it in the chat if you don't wish to. It's probably okay. But you know, you've got a body paragraph there, and you've realized, oh, gee, I think I've got three ideas there in that body paragraph. That won't work. What can I do? Anything? Oops, sorry. Oop. Well, let me share some ideas here. First one, cut something out. Just cut it out of the paragraph and leave it. Maybe you can use it for something else. Next one, and probably the most common strategy, is to divide the paragraph into two, or maybe more paragraphs. And I'll show an example of that. Or you might change the topic sentence. So then you would still have some unity because you are making it clear from the topic sentence that there are maybe two ideas. So let's have a look at some examples because I think hopefully that'll make it a bit clearer. All right, so we have a sample body paragraph here. Now, if you have a look at that last sentence, would you say that that is the same as the rest of the paragraph, anyone? What do you think? Yes or no? Do you think there's just one idea here or two? Particularly if you consider that last sentence there. Just a yes or no. What do people think? Doesn't matter if you're wrong or right. Just have a guess. Anyone like to have a guess? Okay, someone's put something in the chat. Good. Let's see. I think there's two ideas. Yes, and you are correct, Jasmine. There are. So therefore, let's try those three strategies. So the first one, we just delete the thing about the plagiarism because the topic sentence talked about, you know, clarity, coherence, structure, etc. It did not mention plagiarism and AI. So just cut it out, put the line through, and there you have a perfectly fine topic sentence. It's got three sentences, and they're all basically talking about clarity, coherence, and a logical structure. Second idea, make it into two. So you can see the first one is talking about the clarity, coherence, and structure. The second one is saying academic writers should also be aware of plagiarism. So they're leaving the new information at the end of the topic sentence so the reader can easily follow the argument. So that's probably the most common technique to make two paragraphs. And the third one, and this is maybe, not the best idea here because it gets a bit complicated, but you can see they've just added in academic integrity. So, arguably in a way, there is more than one idea, but it's clear, at least from the start, there are a number of topics that are going to be covered. You always have to remember, though, if you are going to do one of these more complicated topic sentences, what it could mean is maybe these aren't the most important ideas because you've just used one paragraph for many. The exception could be if this was right at the start of a longer essay, but in general, it's better to have a simpler topic sentence than perhaps that one is. All right, so now let's move on to coherence and cohesion, two important interrelated ideas. So it's about making sense and making your writing flow. So here I'm going to show you two sentence pairs. So there'll be two sentences in each set, and there's two sets. And I want to ask you, which one flows better, A or B? So there's A. I have a pen, full stop. It is blue. And there is B. I have a pen. Blue is the color of the pen. So would anyone like to have a go there at the in the chat, or you can speak? Which one do you think has a better flow? A or B? Oh, a few ideas here. Let's see what we've got. A. Couple of people saying A. Okay. Dahlia and Akram. Oh, so I agree. Well done. A is better because in A, when you see it, which is the second sentence, you know it's the pen. But in B, you're not absolutely sure blue is referring to the pen until you get to the end of the sentence. Also notice that B, it is the same information, but it's more words. And it's not a good idea to have more words for the same information because that is, in terms of academic writing, it's better to put other important information there. Did have a question here in the chat. Can I participate? Well, you have been, Akram, so I'm not sure what you mean there, but hopefully everything's okay with you. Yeah, we definitely got your contributions in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so basic idea there is familiar to unfamiliar. That's how you want to write in general as a principle. Okay. That is very important. Now, occasionally, you may want to start with something unfamiliar for emphasis or focus, and that's fine. But as a general principle, go familiar to unfamiliar. A few other ideas there. Old to new. Theory to practice. Big to small. Whatever's relevant to what you were writing about. Make things logical and consistent. And then it's easier to read. All right, so let's just have a look at some examples here. So we see here they talk about from sentence to sentence. We've got, one key characteristic of good academic writing is a logical structure, and then it says such a structure. So it starts with the familiar and ends talking about the introduction, body, conclusion. Whereas in the other example, the new information goes first, introduction, body, and conclusion, and they put the structure at the end. So, as I said, you might occasionally go for the other style if you really want to emphasize, and maybe you're going to talk a lot about introductions and bodies and conclusions after that. But in general, go for familiar to unfamiliar, from sentence to sentence, and from paragraph to paragraph. So, here we see one paragraph which is talking about logical structure, and then they're going to talk about cohesion. So they say another key characteristic of academic writing is cohesion, rather than cohesion is another key characteristic of academic writing. I mean, it's a fairly short sentence, so it probably doesn't matter too much, but in general, still easier to read for your readers. And your assignment might be the 30th one your teacher has read or has to read. So make it as easy as you can for your readers to understand the way you are demonstrating your understanding. Okay. Now, also you need to make sense. Now, I don't expect you to read all this. I'll just summarize it a little bit. Basically, it's about smoking. It's a public health. You can see the first one's talking about the number of deaths and various conditions related. The second one's talking about the chemicals in cigarettes, things like that. The third paragraph is talking about the addictive part of tobacco use. And then there is a conclusion. Now, all I want you to do is read the conclusion, okay? Now, is there anything wrong with the conclusion? Let me know. Does it seem to make sense, do you think? Yes or no? What do you think? Don't worry about all the other paragraphs. It was basically just saying smoking isn't good in various ways. But does the final paragraph match that? Someone said it does make sense. It summarizes the subject. Others saying no. Yes. So I would say no, because notice it says smoking should be encouraged. Now, that doesn't seem right. If smoking is really bad because of addiction and chemicals and, or the deaths and all that kind of thing, then yes, that's right. Either smoking is useful or even more, maybe it's really good. So always when you're writing, not just in your conclusions, but even within each paragraph, make sure the examples you're giving match, your conclusions, whichever you're making, even if they're at the end of a body paragraph. It all needs to make sense. So this is a good example of where a essay can be cohesive. It's pretty good flow, but it's not coherent because the conclusion doesn't make sense. So therefore, you need both cohesion and coherence. All right. Now, I also talked about complexity, okay? So in that case, you've got to be careful with generalizations. So we can see it's something that says books are funny, all right? Just a silly example, but, there's many different kinds of books, okay? They're not all funny. That's just the truth. So how can you show that complexity about books? How certain or uncertain you are in terms of what you were trying to say about books. So one strategy is you can use a quantifier. Words like some, a few, many, books are funny. Or you can use what's called a modal verb. Words like can, might, may, So there's a possibility that books can be funny, but it's not 100% that certainty. And speaking of 100%, it's not 100% of the time. Maybe books are often, actually, sorry, that's an error there. I should have written books are often funny, not often be funny. Sorry, grammar, there's a typo there. But anyway, the point is the often. Okay. So also you can even mix them up. Some books can often be funny. Okay. So depending on how certain or uncertain you are. And of course, the topic and the references you got and things like that. Now, speaking of that, you would need to support whatever you are saying. Yes, that's right, Dahlia. Hedging language. Yes. So you might say some books are funny because I read one yesterday which was really funny, really hilarious or something. Books can be funny, but then you might say, however, look at the other side. However, more recently, they've been more serious. Or you might say, books are often funny, for example, and then you'll give an example of a funny book. Some books can often be funny when viewed from, a certain perspective, perhaps. So it is really important that you show how certain or uncertain you are about something. And generally, things are not 100% certain. I mean, some are. I mean, your heart is on the left-hand side of your body. But in a lot of other ways, they are not. So you can use quantifiers, some, a few, many, almost all. Modal verbs can, may, might. Adverbs, often, usually, sometimes, rarely. Words like that. So enough from me. Here we have something about dreams are interesting. Now, would anybody like to type in the chat or just say to us a sentence, a qualified sentence that is not dreams are interesting. It's not saying 100% of the time dreams are interesting. So would anyone like to try that either in the chat or you can just say it out loud if you turn your mic on. I don't mind either way. I know this is maybe a little bit harder thing to do, but just think in your own mind, what do you think about dreams? I would say, really, they're not 100% interesting, or certainly not always 100% interesting to other people, your dreams. So anyone like to have a go at, you don't have to do the because, however, for example, just qualify. Oh, I think we've got one there. Okay. Yep. You could say many dreams are interesting. Good. Okay. Thank you. Allah Akram. So you could definitely say that. Okay. So that's all about qualifying and reflecting the complexity. All right. Write concisely, clearly, and specifically. Very important. Less is more. So here's something that I like to call, I just made up this sort of formula myself. It's nothing to do with mathematics. The teaching of English, right? That's 4 words, isn't it? Now, could anybody tell me how can you say the teaching of English in 2 words? Using 2 of those 4 words. How could you do that? Does anybody know how you could do it? Okay. Something there in the chat. English teaching. Good. Very good. Okay. Dahlia. So, can you see that? It's kind of like x of y equals yx. So the teaching of English, x of y, becomes English teaching or teaching English. Yes, you could also say that, Haya. that's right. They both can fit. Yes, that's right. So, well done, everybody. So, the principle there is that if you have a large noun phrase, a thing with a preposition like of, in, with, to, maybe you can reduce the words but keep the meaning. That's always a good thing because then you've got more words to say something more about something else. Therefore, you are doing more on the topic, and that will be a greater contribution. Also, should get you a better mark too. And it's easier to read. All right. Another thing is to consider, the assumptions your readers can make and repetition. Maybe there's too much repetition in your writing. So here, you see, we've got 41 words. Someone talking about being an English teacher, teaching grammar and vocabulary and things like that. Now, here you can cut quite a lot and still keep the meaning. So let's have a look here at some specific examples. So we're saying, as an English teacher, I teach both grammar and vocabulary. So therefore, we can assume you have a class. So you don't have to say in my class. You can just say, I teach students 10 new words. Instead of saying a week, say weekly. Now, we already know you've got students. So instead now, you can just say the students. They, instead of the students. And then you're talking about a diary. And then we can just use the pronoun, just like we did with the pen, the blue pen before. It needs to contain 5 sentences using the new words because we already said there were 10 new words. So we don't have to say that again. So this is a good example of cutting down words that are not really needed. And if you look and see here, you can see this is without all the cuts and everything. So about 7 words less, still the same meaning. That's better communication. All right. Also, using specific verbs and adjectives. Now, in English, 3 of the very common verbs are be, do, and have. Be is like is, was, were. Do is do, does, did. Have, will have, had. Now, they're fine. Sometimes you want to use them. But if you can, it's better to use the more specific verbs because you are the discipline apprentice. Use the verbs of your discipline. So let's have a look. So here, the teacher is using pictures to help support the students in the science lesson. But why not say instead, the teacher scaffolded the science lesson with pictures. And it's 6 less words, same meaning, and probably clearer because you use the education word scaffolded instead of to help support the students. Scaffolded basically means to help support the students. So you use the specific verb. So that's a good example. And then with the adjectives, here we've got the students were making a lot of noise and not paying attention. Why not just say the students were noisy and inattentive? So, again, you've got a good word saving there of half. Actually, you said the same thing in half the words. Wow. That's great. As I said, because it's always better to say the same with less if you can, and also use specific words in these cases, specific verbs and adjectives, specific actions and descriptions. All right. Now, I did talk as well before about your academic voice. So let's have a look at an example. Now, this is a direct quote from a book, Joseph Williams, who's written many good books on academic writing, about using subjects to name characters and verbs to name the actions. So you have specific sentences and concrete ones. So here, to paraphrase that, you can use some additional language that really shows you understand. So you might have already talked before about something William said. So now you're showing there's an addition. Furthermore, then you use the reporting verb. So rather than just say said, you say asserts, because he's sort of being positive about this. And the reporting verbs, they can be positive, neutral, like just outlined or described, or negative, like argue or challenge, things like that. And then we've got a specific adjective key, and effective, and also a general noun principle. Now, I'm going to show you a list of general nouns in a moment. They're probably for a little bit more advanced kind of academic writing, but they're very useful as well, particularly for cohesion. So let me show you some more. So here are some academic general nouns. So to give you an example, you might say something like, Smith argues that classrooms should be strictly controlled. And then you put full stop, and then you say, this strict viewpoint, or something like that. So you don't just, the thing that Smith's saying is a viewpoint. So you make that clear. Or you might say, Marx believed in the dictatorship of the proletariat, full stop. This radical theory, has influenced much political discourse since, or something like that. So choosing the right general noun can be very useful in helping develop your argument. This is just a few. There are more, and some may be more specific to particular disciplines. So you would find that as you study more. All right. Now, I didn't want to talk too much about referencing, but I just added this one in more recently. And I don't know what style of referencing you're doing, but basically referencing is two key skills. So you follow the rules, and that may include the order of the parts, particularly in the reference list, different kind of font you might have to use, including italics, what you capitalize in terms of titles, and the punctuation you use with the full stops and the commas. You will slowly get better at that. Just keep going with it, and be consistent. That's very important, particularly in your reference list. But finding the most current, relevant, and credible sources is a challenge for everyone, because the information is always changing in the journal articles, in the books, on the websites, etc. All your key points in your body paragraphs need support from referencing, but typically with references, you may not need them for your introduction if you're just giving a very general background, talking about your purpose for your paper and the preview. Your topic sentences in your body paragraphs, they are just saying, this is what this paragraph is about. So again, they shouldn't require references, and no new information in your conclusion. We did mention that before when I talked about the numbers for 0. Okay, so just a quick word on referencing, because now I want to move on to a couple of resources that I recommend a lot, and I think you'll find them very useful too. So the first one is the Academic Phrase Bank. So these are the links, but if you just put them in any search engine, it'll probably be the first thing that comes up. So this is from English University, and I talked before about the connectives, like furthermore, for example, however, in conclusion. Well, this is kind of like that, but it shows you actually how to start a whole sentence. And they've got relationships or purposes from the left to right at the top, and also from top to bottom on the left. The ones on the left, top to bottom, where it says general language functions, I think you might find them a little bit more useful because the ones on the top are a little bit more research focused. So let's have a look at one. So I went for explaining causality because causality is very, very fundamental to all academic writing, cause and effect. Or sometimes it's a little more complex. Sometimes it might be, I didn't study, therefore I failed the exam. That's cause and effect. But might be my cause, effect, consequence, solution. Might be I didn't study, therefore I failed the exam, and consequently my parents were angry. However, from now on, I'm going to study harder. So that was a cause, effect, consequence, solution. Now, let's though go back to the causality here. So let's go for, I think I picked nouns indicating causality. And see here, you can see many ways you can start a sentence with like a focus on the noun, indicating some causality. Okay, so this website, very, very useful. It's open access for ways to your sentences. Okay, that is the academic phrase bank. Now, also this one is called Rhyme Zone, but it's not just about rhymes, writing poems or songs. There is some academic application to this one. Like, for example, you can find synonyms, similar words in this rhyme zone here. Thank you, Ahmed. He just put the link there in the chat for the academic phrase bank. So I'm going to put in the word effect, okay? Because you could write in your paper, the students, sorry, the test had an effect on the students. Now, you could write that. That's okay. Grammar is okay. But you're not telling me what was the size of the effect. Was the effect good or bad? I don't know. So if we want to say more than there was just an effect, we need an adjective because adjectives are good summarizers. So I put in effect, we hit the search button, and then we go for this function here that says descriptive words. So that's the one you click on, descriptive words. And then you go to the bottom paragraph, and that will give you words that often go together with the word effect. So you might say the test had a significant negative effect on the students because they all failed. So that is useful to the reader because they know the nature of the effect, negative, and the size of the effect, significant. So these adjectives are particularly useful in conclusions because adjectives are very good summarizers for what you might have talked about in a lot more detail in your body paragraph. So use the correct adjectives in your conclusions. Okay, so just some key points to finish. Write to demonstrate your understanding. Use quality sources. up-to-date, credible, and relevant sources. Always think about why your teacher has asked you to do the task, because that will help you to actually do it. So don't get too focused on passing or failing, but think, why am I doing this? How does it relate to what I did before? And how might it relate to what I have to do next? Make it as easy as possible for your readers to understand. So that gets back to all the ideas about, topic sentences not too long, paragraphs not too long, things like that. Move from familiar to unfamiliar. We talked about the blue pen. Don't have more than one idea in a topic sentence. We talked about 3 things you can do if you have that. Reflect the complexity. We talked about the tentative language, the can, may, might, usually, sometimes, often, and all that kind of thing. And to be concise as you can. That's very important. Yes, and enjoy the process no matter what. Yes, of course. That's good. And yes, I do really recommend those websites, Dahlia. I've recommended them for years, and they've always been, students generally tend to find them useful. And there's a few other good functions in the Rhyme Zone one, by the way, so you might want to check that out later. So that's the sort of the take-home points, if you wish. And thank you for your participation. I hope you all reach your goals in academic writing. And one of my heroes, Duke Ellington, he faced a lot of challenges in his life, but and he always said a goal is a dream with a finish line. So I think that's a nice way to finish. If you're not familiar with him, he is an Afro-American jazz musician who started music in 20s, 30s, and 40s. And was very successful despite a lot of difficulties, of course, in America at that time. So that's all from me. Are there any questions? Yes, thank you, everyone, for your participation, and I hope there was something of use to you there that can help you with your writing. So if you have any questions, yeah, thank you, Akram. Thanks for everyone for your contributions. So if there are any questions,
if you have any questions, guys, please feel free to unmute, ask the question, or write your question in the chat box. You're more than welcome.
And also, I wasn't aware about this journal, so I'll check that out. What's it called?
It's called Brief Encounters. I'll send a link in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good, yeah. So I'll hopefully I might see some of the things I covered today in the future issues of the journal.
For sure, thank you.
It might get better and better.
Yeah. I did have a question, if it's okay. I wanted to ask you about how you know when a sentence is the topic sentence, because I find this really difficult. I find it difficult to try and decide what in my paragraph is the actual point I'm making.
Well, I mean, the first thing is generally in the position. Typically, it's the first sentence of your body paragraph. I mean, really, when you talk about topic sentences, it's really only body paragraphs you're talking about there, because your introduction has too many things it's doing, and your conclusion is kind of its own little thing. It's almost like a mini essay, because it's emphasizing what you did, the significance of it, and broader implications. So I would make all your topic sentences in your body paragraphs the first one. And you also really need to think about how your argument has developed. So one thing you can consider is, maybe once you've done a draft, just write 2 or 3 words that sum up each body paragraph, and then look at that order and then think, is this the best order for my ideas? So then you might change it around a bit. And then, yeah, as I said, just go from familiar to unfamiliar. How you develop the whole paper is kind of up to you. You know, you might go from most important to least important or the other way around, or it might be thematic. You might look at, I'm just making this up. It might be, you know, I'm looking at the psychological, then the political, then the philosophical aspect. But whatever structure you have should be relevant to the topic and consistent all the way through the paper. I think that was pretty much all I could say there. But just remember that each topic sentence really is just saying, this is what this paragraph is about. That's all you're telling the reader. So don't overcomplicate it. Generally, what I find is students, especially strangely enough, who people have English as a second language, they write really complicated sentences, you know, long, complicated sentences. No need. You know, like sometimes students say, oh, but it needs to look academic and all that. I said, well, it just needs to be clearly communicated. But you don't want to be too simple. So you don't want to use words like good, bad, kids, things. You know, you have to use the language of your discipline, but there's nothing wrong with being simple. You know, George Orwell wrote a very good book about clean. I can't remember the exact name of the book now, but he wrote a very good book about plain English writing, and his writing has stood the test of time too. So hopefully that might just give you some ideas, George, rather than the absolute answer. Now, Jasmine was asking some tips related to the writing session in IELTS. It's been a while since I've done anything with IELTS, to be honest, Jasmine. But most of the things I've said should help you with the IELTS, with the exception of the referencing, which you don't have to do. I mean, I think the IELTS is really just a little bit more simplified academic writing. So maybe in the IELTS, you might be able to get away with them 2-sentence paragraphs, but all the other basic principles should be the same. You know, cohesion, coherence, be specific, be consistent, make sure it all makes sense, and that kind of thing. And if your English is a second language, make sure you spell correctly too. I had a student once years ago, they wrote an essay about nuclear power, but every time they spelled nuclear, they spelled it unclear. So, you know, it was just something that didn't quite stick with them. But, you know, that kind of thing is a real big problem because your whole credibility of your paper is gone. So particularly with your keywords, make sure they're spelt correctly. But I know that's a bit tricky with IELTS because you don't always know what the topic is. But do that as best you can. There's also, and I know internet issues are an issue there, but just, you know, if you Google IELTS and just see what resources are out there. One thing sometimes I say to people is, think about the topic and then just put the topic in, then just put PDF. And then sometimes you'll get PDF documents first, you know, and then that might be a guide or something like that. Another thing is, and I better shut up shortly because I know you're running out of time, but there is a website called SlideShare. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but it can be quite useful because what it is, it's just a whole big collection of student PowerPoints. So, you know, it's not 100% reliable, but you can see, like there may be some students who've done some PowerPoints on how to pass the IELTS exam. So it's kind of at your level, you know, and you know, that kind of thing. So it's not something you'd want to reference, but it might just help, you know, some slightly more accessible way into a topic because you can see how other students have tried and struggled with the material. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Mark, I have a question if you don't mind.
Sure.
Now you were talking about some complicated writing by non-native or second language learners.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to writing. And perhaps this comes from L1 transfer or L1 interference, etc. Now,
Yeah.
we struggle sometimes when we mark or give feedback to our students on writing. We struggle with moving them from thinking in Arabic or first language to thinking English when writing. You talked about repetition. Repetition is a key feature of Arabic. And unfortunately, many of our students convey or transfer this feature of writing in Arabic to English, which results in probably awkward writing or not really coherent
You mean
writing.
too repetitive, you mean?
Yeah, too repetitive. This is a feature of
because
Arabic.
I see. Right. Okay.
So
Well,
we
that's
transfer it into English. But
yeah.
what is your suggestion for students? How can they avoid it? How can they improve their skill of writing a product that is not repetitive, that is coherent, and not like impacted by their first language? Is it through reading too much?
Well, I think that could help, but I mean, the first thing, again, going back to my point about principles, repetition isn't always bad. You know, sometimes it's useful just to really emphasize something. But to avoid repetition, two strategies come to my mind. The first is synonyms. You know, use some similar word, and there are thesauruses online. There's many online. I think even RhymeZone might have a function for that. And also using pronouns, particularly it, or words like this or these. And when I talked before about the general nouns, you know, so you might say, you know, the students were very disruptive in the class. Then you might say full stop. Then you could say, you know, these disruptive pupils or students, you know, if you didn't say pupils, you know, that could help. Or you could just simply say this disruption, which kind of is a larger noun group to describe the disruptive students. So I guess the two main things would be, you know, the use of synonyms and the use of pronouns, but also they need to remember there's a big fundamental difference between fiction and non-fiction in terms of the reference. So with academic writing and most non-fiction writing, you know, you'll say something and then you might have the pronoun or whatever, and that refers back. But in fiction, you know, you might read a book that starts with, you know, she was scared. She didn't know where she was, you know. So the pronoun comes first to build up the suspense. But that is not your goal in academic writing. So, or, you know, have your pronouns, but make sure they refer back and clearly to something that came before, but there's no confusion. So sometimes just using it is no good, or they, because there might be a few things that it could be. So you might need to use this or these, and then you might use an adjective and a general noun, or at least a general noun like this system. Or you could use such a system. So there may be three strategies you could think about. But any reading you do in English will be helpful, even if it's comic books, because, you know, you slowly absorb some of the patterns of rhetoric. And then if you develop your English and you still got your Arabic, well, you're well ahead of most English speakers who can only speak English.
Very useful. Thank you, Mark. Any questions, guys, or any comments before we wrap up and finish?
Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. I'll just make sure I've got a copy of that. Good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I better let you go because
thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate it.
Worries. Yeah. Well, hopefully that's of some use. And
it is,
all the best, everyone. And I'll look forward to reading you all in the journal.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mark, and have a good
time.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
You
thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone. Bye. Bye. Bye.